today is going to be featuring a subject matter that I think is very close to all of our panelists today on engaging families in school choice. I want to thank Andrew and his team over at the National School Choice Week for choosing our event as a spotlight event. And you can see we're all we've got our National School Choice Week yellow scarves on and our kind of little banners behind us. So we're excited to get started here. I will be moderating. My name is Amy Holland. I am the Director of Enrollment Collaboration Initiatives here at InfoSnap. I've been with InfoSnap for about 5 years, but I've been in consulting and technology and education for over 25 years. And yeah, I kind of just dated myself, but the topic is very important to InfoSnap. As the leading provider of cloud-based enrollment, registration, and management solutions, including choice, we serve a growing client base of about 700 schools, and we also include family support in that. So family support is very central to what InfoSnap does, and ensuring strong family participation and experience in choice is a key priority for InfoSnap. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists, so hopefully everybody can see our presentation that we have on the screen as well as our 4 panelists that we have below. We're fortunate to have 4 respected thought leaders in school choice with us today. First off, and I don't know where she's on your screen, but she's kind of in the middle there. Ashley, if you want to give a wave. We have Ashley Jochim, who is a research analyst at the Center on Reinventing Public Education, better known as CERPE. And Ashley's research focuses on governance, school choice, and the politics of education. And she recently produced a report on how parents experience public school choice, and that's going to be something that's going to help drive our discussions today. I'll be actually showing some of the screenshots from some of her research. And then next up there with the yellow scarf on is Griffin from Responsive Education Solutions. And Grif joined Responsive Ed about 4 years ago to serve as their first senior executive, focusing on branding and marketing, really doing business development and helping customer relations. And during the time he's been there, he's implemented the processes and solutions to achieve significant growth in enrollment, extending Responsive Ed's portfolio of schools. And then next up, we have Armen Hratchian, who is the Vice President of Excellent Schools Detroit. Welcome, Armen. And Excellent Schools Detroit is a coalition of education, civic, community, and philanthropic organizations in Detroit with the shared mission of an excellent school choice for every Detroit child. And Armen leads the organization K-12 strategy, and among other things includes their annual school scorecard that also rates the performance of every Detroit school and helps parents navigate their choices. And then last but not least, we have Vidya Sundaram, who has been with GreatSchools since 2005, leading GreatSchools research and education team. And she is passionate about improving parental education, or engagement in education, and she's also looking for a preschool for her daughter right now, so she's actually experiencing this process firsthand. Our agenda today is going to be going with a panel discussion. So I'm going to be moderating and asking some questions of our panelists, and they'll chime in and share their personal experiences and comments with some great takeaways, I think, that you'll have to leave our session with. We'll be looking at this from a family lens as well as a school lens, so we'll be kind of taking on 2 sides of this conversation around school choice. If you have any questions, we have a large audience, so unfortunately we do have everybody on mute, but we would love to hear your questions. There's 2 ways you can enter questions. You can actually type them into the chat box right in your webinar, and you can also tweet them to #SCWWebinar, and we can take some questions kind of midway through our program today. So we're going to focus right now kind of on the family-facing side of our discussion, and you know, Ashley recently published a report on how parents experience public school choice. And as part of her research, she interviewed 4,000 families in 8 cities. And you can see the cities listed on this graph that you see on your screen right now. And I think kind of at an executive summary level, a lot of things these cities are doing well, but there's also a lot of opportunities for improvement, which we're going to discuss today. And I think one of the items to kind of start the discussion with, and Ashley, I'm going to turn this over to you first, is as you can see from this chart, the majority of families are engaging in choosing a non-neighborhood school. So Ashley, maybe you can kind of give us a high-level kind of picture of some of this with what your research showed. And I know that 5 of the 8 cities you studied chose a school not based on where they live.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. Ashley Jochim here. So the first thing I have to begin when talking about this chart is that these statistics can't tell us necessarily how many parents chose a school. We know that parents can exercise choice by moving to a new neighborhood, so that's sort of a traditional form of school choice. Academics like to call that residential choice. And of course, many families are choosing their neighborhood-based school, so there's that active process of choosing is something really hard to get at. All that said, I think this chart is really noteworthy because what we found is in that 7 of the 8 cities that we studied, 50% or more of families reported choosing a school, non-neighborhood-based public school. And in many cases, this choice came in the form of a charter school, but importantly, it also came in other forms. So families are, in many of these cities, choosing district-managed schools of choice, such as magnet schools, selective admission schools, and in some places, they're choosing schools in other school districts through inter-district choice. So I think the takeaway from this is that in many of these cities, when they're giving parents opportunities to choose a school, these families are largely taking them up on that offer.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Armen, I want to kind of push this over to you now about Detroit. And Detroit, I know, is showing about 59% of families choosing non-neighborhood schools. So can you kind of share a little bit with the audience about how Detroit is looking at choice with enrollment right now?
Sure. So Excellent Schools Detroit a few years back started producing an annual scorecard. We measured the academic performance of all schools. We allowed teachers or invite teachers and students to give input into their perception of their school quality. We visited schools with community reviewers, and we package all of that and get that information out to schools and out to parents, out to families to help them navigate their school choices. To Ashley's point, though, a lot of families choose neighborhood schools, but they're choosing the school. I personally do that where we send our kids to neighborhood school, but we choose that school as well. In Detroit, there are a number of charter schools and magnet schools along the Woodward corridor down in Midtown, where a lot of folks are commuting to those schools, and they're, maybe opting out of their neighborhood school. There are a lot of charter schools in neighborhoods in Detroit that families are choosing as well. Detroit Merit, a National Heritage School, is one example. There's private schools in neighborhoods as well. Detroit Cristo Rey, one of the top performing high schools. And there's lots of DPS, Detroit Public Schools, just traditional district schools that are performing really high, and lots of families are choosing those schools as well. So, when I think about that 59% here in Detroit, I think, I don't know how much that's missing of the parents that are staying close, but I think we have a fairly active school choice kind of energy here in Detroit right now.
Great. Thanks, Armen. So we know that families are opting to choose a school. That's clear from Ashley's research, and we're all kind of in that school choice environment and understand this. But my next question now is, what are some effective strategies that this panel would have for informing the families about their choices that they have, but then also how to engage them in the process? And Vidya, I'm going to pass this one over to you first, because I know with great schools, you're about a lot of information and getting that to families, but having trusted information sources is also important. So if you could kind of share your thoughts on that with the panel.
Sure. Yeah. Well, how we think about it at Great Schools is meeting parents where they're at. We think about that both literally and figuratively. So if a parent might be, in places where they're not actively searching for schools, or they're not already aware of their options, finding ways to get the information out to them where they are physically, and then also taking steps to guide them step by step through the process of choosing, so that they can fully engage in the choice process, are two things that we do to help parents and families engage.
Great. And I do know one other thing with Great Schools, too. You have your kind of national presence, but you also have done a deeper dive in some cities with Great Schools local, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we were working in a number of communities, and even at one state, Delaware, throughout the country, in Delaware and in Milwaukee and other communities, we've worked extensively with community organizations to provide information and tools and guidance to families. Leveraging these trusted sources of information is really important to help get information to families, not just about the schools, but about ways that they can effectively engage in choice.
No, excellent. Grif, I'm going to kind of have you comment from a charter school operator's perspective, because I know you have many brands at Responsive Ed to choose from. You're an InfoSnap client, so we know very well with all your different brands. And you want to assure that a family is getting the right fit choice and how you're engaging your family. So if you want to share a little bit about that from a charter school side.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Beyond the traditional use of websites for distributing information and engaging the parents initially, over the last year and a half, we've really enhanced the use of social media, and like 70 schools in Texas. So as you do that and go through the decision of upgrading technology so it's convenient for the principals in those schools and the staff, there's a phase-in process that you have to do, and so on. But I'll tell you, being new to the industry 3 years ago, sat back, and I think what I brought to the team was a new look, and a look as a parent would see us. And then we went through the process, where would parents go in their decision process, and you look at what great work that GreatSchools does, what SERPI and others do in their research. So we sat back and said, how can we become more granular in the decision process that parents would go through after looking at that? And we're still on a journey to do that. And then very frankly, we started to look at our enrollment system, because now you have a parent interested in the value proposition you have, and we had a very clumsy, very awkward, whatever you want to say, enrollment process that we've improved over the last 9 months.
Yeah, I lived through that with you, so I agree with you on that one, Grif.
Right.
We totally enjoyed that whole process. Okay, great. So kind of as a follow-up now to that, it seems clear that access to school information plays a key role in shaping families' choices decisions. And here's another chart kind of on here from Ashley's research, but yet a quarter of the parents are actually still struggling to get the information they need to choose a school. I'm going to go kind of show a screen here from Cass Technical, which is actually a school in Detroit, and this is one of the screenshots from GreatSchools' website. So, Vidya, I know GreatSchools had over 60 million unique visitors in 2014. I wanted to see if you could share your thoughts a little bit around what data is really important to deliver to the families, and kind of the importance of having more of a centralized clearinghouse for data and how that can help in the choice process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a great example from a school profile for a school based in Detroit. I mentioned we work a lot with community organizations and partners, and Detroit is one community we're working in with Excellent Schools Detroit and Armen. And so this example here shows how GreatSchools presents information to parents in a way that is layered. So parents care a lot about schools, and they care about a lot of aspects of schools. But one thing that's common to parents across the board is that they generally care about academic quality. They place a very high value and importance for schools' academic quality. So one thing that we've tried to do to help parents sort of sift and navigate through a lot of information about schools is to highlight some key pieces of information. So on the left, you'll see information about school quality indicators, and then in the middle, you'll see information about community perspectives on the school. And on the right, you'll see a very high-level way to browse the school's program and extracurricular and other aspects of the school, that a parent who really wants to drill into any aspect that they are more interested in, they can do that. But they can get a quick snapshot up front. And we call this progressive disclosure, where we show a little bit of important information up top, but then it's progressive because a parent can explore and navigate as they see fit.
Gotcha. No, that's great. So kind of moving on to another question here so families are opting in to choose. They need access to the data about the schools, but clearly there's barriers for these families. You know, this is another chart from Ashley's research here showing that, you know, confusion about eligibility is one of the barriers that's cited the most. And I can tell you in my experience consulting with schools every day here at InfoSnap, you know, one of the things that I'm always working with our schools on is kind of best practices and clarities around interpreting eligibility and priorities. You know, sometimes it's based on policy, sometimes it's just accepted practices, but that's definitely something that we look at as we're bringing up our school clients on our enrollment choice solutions. You know, and I can imagine from a family perspective that can be very challenging to navigate, especially if you're an English language learner family. So Armen, I'd like to kind of kick this over to you. SERPI research, again, one of Ashley's points in her research paper, and then Ashley, I'd like you to kind of chime in as well. It shows that Detroit parents were less likely to report struggling with the actual enrollment process itself, but more likely to have difficulty understanding what schools their child was eligible to attend, kind of what this chart is actually talking about. So I don't know if you have any insights into why that may be the case.
Well, I think it's the same as any family anywhere in the country, trying to navigate lots of different schools, lots of different options. And in a place like Detroit, we have everybody kind of can run their own communication strategy. There's different standards that various folks are using. So you have that even more kind of decentralized communications apparatus around this out to parents. I was just, you know, I was looking at this and thinking, so maybe 20% of folks are struggling with their actual application process. But I would say that knowing your eligibility is part of the application process. And I think about, when we think about school choice right now in Detroit, we're thinking of it in kind of two different ways. One is parents' ability and families' ability to navigate the process. And that includes everything from, do you know whether a school is a good fit? Do you understand if you're eligible to go to a school? Is the paperwork confusing? Are application deadlines common? All that kind of stuff. And by the way, part of navigating that is also, do you have the time to go visit 3, 4, 5, 6 schools on the nights they're having open houses or whatever? I just think that's a crazy amount of work for any parent. It's an even crazier amount of work to ask a parent in a place like Detroit that might not have all the resources that many other parents have. So I think there are huge barriers. And then when we think about just, you know, how do you navigate the process, the next step to that is how do you actually access schools. So let's say you can navigate the process. Let's say you know you want to go to Cass Tech, it's downtown, and you understand when to apply and all of that. Can you actually get there every day? Physically get your child there every day. So that's the way we're thinking a lot about this, the SERPI research that was focused on barriers. Is what are the barriers to navigating the process for parents, and what are the barriers then to actually access those choices?
No, great comments. Ashley, what do you have to add kind of from your research perspective when you were talking to families about this particular question?
Yeah, so I see this question as really resting at the intersection between parent information and enrollment. As Armen said, you know, understanding your eligibility for a given school is sort of it has information components, but it also affects your ability to enroll in that school. And, you know, important context here, I think, is as choice has expanded, it's expanded in a very decentralized way. So you've had the growth of charter schools on the one hand, which largely are existing outside of the district context. And then at the same time, you have choice expanding within districts through different types of schools that, you know, schools of choice that districts are offering. As that's happened, it's become very decentralized. Information on schools tends to be very decentralized, and then enrollment is also very decentralized. And I think that creates these challenges for families who are trying to navigate the system of public schools. They're less concerned about whether a school is a charter school or a district school or a magnet school or an innovation school. They're just trying to find the right school for their child. So I think, you know, our research suggests that, you know, there are some really important benefits to streamlining these processes. So it's, you know, so it's easier for parents to navigate the system and access the school of their choice. All that said, simplifying enrollment and even information is no sure path to improving parents' experiences navigating these systems. And I think the big reason why is that a simplified enrollment process doesn't necessarily help the parent who, is choosing from a bunch of schools that maybe aren't very high quality or don't provide a good fit. So, and then there's also the challenge of getting your child to and from school each day. So you could have great school options, but if you can't get your child there, there's these other sticking points in the process that can really shape families' experiences. So it's a sort of a necessary, streamlining these processes is a necessary but sort of insufficient basis for improving families' experiences.
Yes, if I could just add from our experience here, based on both the comments, Armen and Ashley, like a lot of aspects of our lives, with the growth of social media, there's information overload. So it's the process. The information's out there. It's a way of focusing and distilling it in a trusted way, as great schools are doing. So parents don't have to go and spend hours, days, months trying to understand the language of each of the sites they're going to. And I think as those of us in charter schools, I mean, we have charter schools within districts, so you start layering the complexity and the understanding that all of us in the education industry who are directly involved, as we are, and those providers like yourself and SERPI and great schools, have to do exactly what Armen's doing, and in a couple of metropolitan areas we are, and that is using collaboration from all the parties, have a focus on a consistent language, a consistent approach, and that helps the family, and take a family view in what you're producing out there.
Right.
Amy, if I could just jump in for a quick second.
Absolutely.
I think the other piece of all this is, or maybe put a focus on just how we measure performance too. I mean, I'm going back to the great schools, Cass Tech, right? Like everybody started racing out to put a rating on a school, as did we at Excellent Schools Detroit, right? In Detroit, you can find 5 or 6 different academic rating systems or scorecards. Not only is that really frustrating to families, it's really frustrating to schools. I can't imagine operating a school in a space where you've got 6 or 7 or 5 different entities all judging you, and they're going to put that out to the public. So, to Griff's point, there is this really important kind of information overload issue that we have here, and I think it's good that we have multiple sources of information, but I think we all have to be pretty sensitive to what that means for schools and families alike when we have a little bit too much. Yeah, no, that's great feedback. So, we've talked about some of these barriers now. We all understand what's going on with these barriers and transportation and, all of this information overload. But what kind of supports and interventions would this panel recommend that might be effective in engaging families in choice? I know I can speak from personal experience with a lot of our InfoSnap clients. We have 700 different clients in the public school districts and charter schools and charter management groups. They've taken on some things like some of my KIPP schools have done, where they'll have kiosks and have kind of community outreach nights where they'll come into their school with their staff there to help the families apply. They'll have out at local libraries, they'll go out and have kind of their staff there to have community engagement. They'll give them free Gmail accounts. They even do door-to-door canvassing with tablets to fill out the application. So really trying to engage that family experience and make them be able to get access to the information. Grif, I know Responsive Ed is doing some new activities trying to engage families, like your call center and some of these enrollment nights. Can you share a little bit kind of to start this question off for our team?
Well, yes, and really is platformed off my earlier remarks. We have 6 distinct brands, and I found when I got here that, let's say a common term out there that all of our schools use is individualized learning or personalized learning. Well, depending on, you could talk to a principal in one brand and get a little different flavor than on the other, and while there should be the nuances, there has to be a common definition or explanation. I call it language. that you inform the person on. I spent 30 years at IBM. You know, we probably had volumes. I know we had volumes, and it was all acronyms, and the only other people that would understand it were IBMers. And that's true in the education industry. It's an organizational problem. It's a movement problem. So to answer your question, what we've done over the last 2.5 years is come up with a common language across our brands and trying to make that part of our training, part of our culture, so that our people in the field and teachers use that. We're in the process of implementing a call center in conjunction with InfoSnap. I mean, our enrollment processes were different, if you can believe that. Brands, and you'd have family move from one brand to another. And what Armen said, I keep coming back to collaboration and always having a sensitivity to the fact that the person on the other end of the line either does not understand the language, they haven't experienced school of choice, or perhaps the school of choice that they had is, if you move from California to Texas, and the opportunity and the processes and how you run lotteries are different. Yeah. And you know, down here, Texas is getting a lot of people from all over. So we have to be sensitive to it. And I think it just comes back to fundamentally, whether you're in this industry or any other industry, is everything that you do that touches outside the organization, you have to have a customer-centric, parent-centric, in this case, point of view.
No, great thoughts.
I'll jump in here. Or,
okay, go ahead, Ashley. Yep, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is an area, you know, when we're thinking about identifying the most effective levers for engaging families, that we really need more research. And this is something SERPI is actively working on right now. The one thing we do know from the work that we have done is that parents really crave more personalization and interactivity in the information sources that are available to them. So in our survey, you know, we asked parents about a range of different types of information, and the school visit was deemed the most useful by over half of the parents that answered our survey. So I thought that was pretty remarkable, and it suggests this tension. You know, at the one hand, you need a process for simplifying what information on the front end, but then at the same time, families, when they're looking at 1 to 3 schools, they really want to be able to go to that school, talk with the teachers, and sort of have that more interactive experience to sort of help them finalize their choice.
Yeah, that's actually a great comment, Ashley. I know one thing with a lot of our schools that we see with our clients is, as part of their application or enrollment process, they'll require that they come on to do a school visit, and they actually get like a number that they have to put into their application. And if they don't have that number, that means they've completed that school visit. To understand that school culture, they can't even continue with the application process. So, Armen, you had a comment as well?
Well, I was just going to say, I think part of touching families and parents in a much more personalized way during this process is to focus in on what group of parents we're talking about when we talk about school choice. In Detroit, some new research is coming out that will show that in Detroit, parents and families, kids are moving schools 2.5 times at the rate of kids statewide. And the more times they're moving, the more they're falling behind. And so this idea, no matter if they go to a better school or not, and this idea that we want to just keep asking parents, go choose, 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 I think what we're trying to think about is, how do we help parents make a really great choice once? You're coming into kindergarten or first grade or preschool, you're going into 9th grade. Like, let's get you all the information, let's help you get to that school visit, let's do all that stuff, and make sure that you're really confident in that first choice. We hear from a lot of school partners that, you know, every time there's a conflict in their school, or every time somebody doesn't like a teacher, in a hyper, what I often call this, like a hyper school choice environment in Detroit, the default is go find another school instead of, you know, let's work this out, let's stick with this. I mean, I had all kinds of teachers and school personnel that I loved, and I had some bad experiences too, right? But you stick with it. And I think the research, I don't know if Ashley has seen some of this other research, but I think the research started to pan out that show that, you know, make 1 or 2 really good choices. Obviously, there's exceptions, but we shouldn't be trying to help every 3rd grader find a new 4th grade and every 4th grader find a new 5th grade. And, you know, so just want to temper some of the way we're thinking about who to touch in this place.
Yeah, and I'll just add one note to that. I think in the one system where we have universal choice, which is in New Orleans, where nearly every family is not assigned a school based on their address, they've had to work hard actually to sort of try to centralize their enrollment process, and not just the kids coming into the system, so when you start a school, but also coming out of the system around expulsion. And so they really have tried to reduce mobility, because it's not just disruptive to kids, it's also really disruptive to schools, because schools that have kids entering mid-year are really at a distinct disadvantage to try to help that kid. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to think about with how do you sort of reduce mobility as choice expands. So one part of that is parent information. I think another side of it is around sort of these processes for enrollment and expulsion and transfers. I encourage people to look at New Orleans as a place that's been thinking hard about those issues.
Yeah, if I could, Amy, it comes back being a big fan for the last 25 years of partnerships and collaboration. I think we can start with ourselves. We can become a source of information and that trusted advisor, just like you'd expect from some medical questions that you have. And I think it's developing the mindset, as proud as we are individually of all of our schools. Some of our schools will not be the best experience for that particular student at this particular time. And it always interests me, and I talk to some of my colleagues up here in charter schools, I don't know how people in the charter movement sleep at night knowing they have waiting lists if they haven't picked up the phone and attempted to see if there is a seat in another charter school or a magnet school or any other school of choice, public school, where they know that that child would fit in, and so on. So I'm just saying that a lot of that information exchange really, I think, is the responsibility of the organizations that are in the business.
Great comment. So let's shift our topic a little bit now, and this is something that I know our InfoSnap team here is very committed and focused on, is how can technology assist with the family engagement side of school choice? We design our systems with the family experience in mind. We support the families with over 2 million family submission forms last year alone. We have a lot of experience in knowing what makes things easy for families and where there can be some barriers. So that's always something how we try and design our solutions. School leaders can invest in systems that support families, and this kind of was one of the charts that we'll get to in a little while that shows the different pieces of that. But I want to first of all show Responsive Education's online application that they went with InfoSnap on. This is just a sample of them taking kind of that paper process that Grif was sharing. It was very kind of all over the place, and they moved it forward online, kind of cloud-based. And they even put a Spanish language version up for their English language learners. So, Grif, I don't know if you have anything else to share about kind of moving, to a system like this and how that affected your recruitment efforts, because I know it was all about kind of re-engaging with your families and more touches with your families and that whole recruitment process for you to meet your responsive ed growth goals.
Right. I think you summarized it up very well. With the before we came with particular solution to the enrollment and application process, parents had to fill out 13 different pages, and they had the opportunity to write their name and address 8 different times. So right. Here you got excited about this new innovative school that their child's going to be attending, and you get an application packet that looked like it came out of the last century. So, and what we're going to be doing, very frankly, is improving on this. And then I sit here and listen to the kind of work that CERPI's doing in great schools and so on. I'm not so sure going forward that there wouldn't be a way on this enrollment form that if the parents got questions, what would be a good choice for me, we couldn't just link them over to great schools. So that's how we have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Great Schools, we've been talking about that. So that is definitely something that the team at Great Schools and InfoSnap have been looking at as well, kind of that link from the Apply Now piece. So So good thoughts there, Griff, definitely. Ashley, I wanted to kind of let you chat for a minute. I know you had mentioned to me a comment kind of about how smartphones and that whole piece brings into this with the actual application. So do you want to kind of share a little bit about your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I think this is an area where we're going to see great growth over the next several years. So we have these new parent information systems coming online in many cities. GreatSchools, of course, has its work. And I think that there is an opportunity to really utilize the smartphone more effectively in these areas. And, we know that many low-income households, they may lack broadband access, they may lack a computer at home, but many times these families do have access to their smartphones. So I think that this is an important place where, if you're creating a parent information or a parent guide, to make that guide accessible, and compatible with a smartphone, because families might be looking for schools using that device. The other thing that we've heard about, and I think that there's some early evidence that this is really effective, is the use of text messages to sort of support the enrollment process. So in New Orleans, one of the things we heard from talking with parents down there is that the text message that the enrollment system sends out to remind people to submit their application has been hugely helpful. Because this is one of those things where as choice expands, and enrollment has high stakes. If you miss that application deadline, you may not get into the school, your top school. So just having little things like that, super cost effective. You can just ask families if they want to sign up for them, and then send them those reminders. A great way, low-cost way to support families through the choice process.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Absolutely. Okay, so now comes our audience participation segment of our webcast here. And actually, Vidya, this question is for you. This is from one of our listeners here that we have that has called in from, her name is Laura. And she wanted to know, Vidya, how do you motivate parents who are having a good experience at the school to go online and provide ratings? Because typically it's families who are unhappy that are more vocal.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think you do see somewhat of a bimodal distribution of ratings, where you have a lot of favorable ratings and you have a lot of unfavorable ratings of a school. But we haven't necessarily seen that on our site with our ratings, with ratings being skewed to be more negative. So, I think one thing that a lot of schools are doing is when I talk to marketing directors at schools or school staff and administrators, I hear a lot of them talk about how they are very interested in parents sharing opinions about the school. So, I've seen it very effective for schools themselves to go out and solicit parents to write positive, or they don't actually ask for positive comments, at least they don't tell me that, but I've seen a lot of schools mention that they do a lot of outreach to their parents to get more comments in the schools. And then for GreatSchools, we also make it really easy for parents to review their schools. There's the one-click button. You can go in and review your school, and we have a community moderated and a in-house moderation process that's very simple. We don't filter any reviews other than for basic things like if they name an individual at the school, or if they use language that is inappropriate, bad words.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so now let's kind of shift over to the city and school focus side of our discussion. And, given families have this challenge navigating choice, what kind of rich information and tactics should communities and schools invest in to bring choice to families? Our clients, some of them, I've mentioned a lot of ways that they do with these mandatory information nights, because it's really hard to gauge sometimes from a school website, like Ashley was saying too, that, that soft kind of information about the feeling and the culture of the school. So, here is something that GreatSchools has come out with, a guided search tool that can help parents identify what their needs are and really fit their child's needs. And this was recent. I think you guys launched this in Delaware, right, Vidya? recently, and it kind of asks a series of questions and then can kind of display the results. So again, Vidya, I'm putting you on the spot here again. If you want to share a couple of brief thoughts around kind of this new tool.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is great, and I'm excited to talk about this, in particular, kind of following up on the conversation earlier, really interesting conversation about mobility and helping parents really think through the decision and the implications of making a school choice decision, both in the short term and in the long term. This tool was something that we developed with the state of Delaware, and that we're planning on scaling out to other locations in the U.S. This is a way for us to help parents first understand what their needs are through asking really simple questions and then giving them really interactive feedback. So tying together some of the findings that Ashley found in her research with parents really looking for interactive tools and guidance. This is how we've designed a way for parents to first articulate what their needs are and their students' needs are, and then see the full range of options that meet that criteria. And they can, I don't have control over the mouse, but if you look over to sort of the top left, sorry, in the next slide.
Okay.
So this slide is great. This shows the list of schools that, once you've gone through the questionnaire, you see a list of schools that you can sort by the distance from your address, or by rating, or by fit to the criteria that you gave when you answered the questionnaire. And so here it's sorted by rating, but you can sort by fit, you can sort by distance, and then you can get a sense of what are the full set of available options. And we call this broadening the parent's consideration set. And so in this way, we can help parents maybe become aware of an option or a set of options that they may not have known about before, or may have dismissed because they had heard something or heard some misinformation about the school. So these tools can really help leverage technology in ways that help parents navigate a very complex process, and hopefully simplify it for them, and that helps them identify more options than they might have thought were possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's dig in a little bit here on this, how different is the choice process within different high choice cities? This is a chart from Ashley's research that I think really does a great job showing some of the different investments that a city can make in the choice market, looking at parent information, enrollment systems, transportation. Many times there might be some funders on our call with us today. Many times these are things that are funded. Cities have to go out and get funding. I'm sure, Armen, is something that you guys are looking at with Detroit right now. It's also on the parent information side. I've been talking, I was actually just at the SERPI conference down in Memphis talking to a lot of the superintendents and charter operators, and they're actually actively engaged in running full-fledged marketing campaigns because they're doing recruitment, and they know the money follows the students, and really wanting to make sure that parents understand what choice is about and getting that best fit for the child. So Ashley, I'm going to kind of let you hop in here a little bit, and I think one of the key things that Armen talked a little bit before about transportation. Obviously, the number one thing, if a child and a parent, if they can't get to the school, then they can't really pick that school. That's kind of a major issue, and this talks about that. But I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts about this chart, and then I want to hear from Armen a little bit about how Detroit's looking at this as well.
Yeah. So I think, as a researcher, I'm always putting caveats on the data here. I just want to let people know that we rated cities back in March of 2014. So it's been almost a year now, and I know several of the cities on our list have, things are constantly moving. So Cleveland has recently launched a new initiative around parent information, and Detroit's work, led by Armen and his team at Excellent Schools Detroit, have expanded their efforts in that area. All that said, I think what you get from this chart is that parents really confront wildly different systems of school choice across America. So in New Orleans and Washington, D.C., there's been a really extensive investment in systems that support school choice. So there are multiple parent guides available. Parents don't have to navigate multiple application processes anymore in either of those cities. They have a common enrollment system that enables parents to choose among charter and traditional district schools through a single application. In New Orleans, all charter schools are required to provide transportation to their families. So you can see as a family, navigating this system, if you're in New Orleans versus a city like Cleveland or Detroit, you're having a very different experience. Your ease of access is very different. So I think, this suggests that this has important implications for other cities looking to make these investments. They can learn a lot from cities like New Orleans, DC, and Denver, who have sort of are on the bottom of that chart and have done the most. And thinking about how to support parents through the process of choosing.
Great. Armen?
Yeah, I agree with all of this, and this is what we're working on right now. A few things. I think that if we're going to have school choice policies, and I do believe that it's more than a privilege for parents to choose a school or families to choose a school. It's an absolute right that they should be able to choose a school. That said, if we don't have the infrastructure, and I think this should be public infrastructure. I don't think that this should be philanthropically supported long-term, maybe initial investments, but I think that this is part of the school system, is to make sure that parents can navigate it and make sure that they're clean, clear, accessible, equitable enrollment processes that are fair to both families and parents and schools. And I think that you should be able to get where you want to get. Now, transportation doesn't mean you're crossing the city, by the way. It might mean that you're just trying to get a mile and a half down the road, and it's dark and it's 6 in the morning and you're having to walk through the cold, right? Like that doesn't have to be moving kids everywhere and anywhere. These things are really expensive to go citywide. We're talking and thinking about this kind of stuff. So I'll just say, Excellent Schools Detroit launched a pretty robust parent information campaign about 3 years ago, and I'd make the case that we're up there with most investment and kind of most thought about the parent information side. We quickly realized that without clear processes to actually enroll and ways to get there, you can give parents all the information you want. What you eventually will have is a pretty stratified city where all the families with transportation get to all the good schools wherever they are, and a lot of parents that don't have transportation or can't navigate 6 school visits or whatever else it might be aren't able to access choice. So, in my mind, it's a part of the public infrastructure, and it's also a huge equity issue and part of the evolution that this whole school choice movement needs to be really serious about.
The one thing I'll add, just to piggyback a little bit on Armen's comments, is that making these investment decisions, and at CERPI we've pushed hard and that they should be public investments or at least publicly supported. There is this challenge in a lot of cities as choice has expanded about who is actually in charge of these efforts, who is responsible for sort of putting their arms around these challenges, which are really not sector specific. So that's something I think that when you're thinking about making these investments, you need to make a decision about who is going to have control over them. And in a place like Detroit or Cleveland, that is really ambiguous, right? Less than half of the kids in Detroit attend Detroit public schools. The other half are enrolled in other schools that are sponsored by, I think around 11 or 12 different entities. So there are some complicating decisions in there around trying to address concerns around enrollment and transportation when no single actor is in charge.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Ashley, I know when I was down at NACSA Miami for all the charter authorizers, that was something that came up. I mean, you've got some cities that have, tens of authorizers, and then you've got districts that are authorizing. And even if you're looking at common enrollment, you've got all different agencies in there. So a lot of players can kind of be all stirring that pot together. So I don't know. Yeah, that's it. Armen, did you have a comment on that one?
No, we're living it. But kind of maybe final thought on all this stuff. We're exploring all this, but every one of these pieces of infrastructure, this isn't plug-and-play stuff. Like, there are some really great national experts that can help folks think through this, but we have had a 18-month incredibly deliberate process thinking about common enrollment in Detroit with school leaders and community leaders and families and Transportation, same thing. They're huge values that show up in the policies that guide these different pieces. And they really should be driven by the community, driven by the folks that we all work with. So this won't look the same in every city. It's going to look different for every city. But I think that at some level we have to make sure that school choice is equitable, and this is part of that infrastructure.
Amy, if I could,
Sure.
just to add on to what Ashley said, and Armen, agree completely with it. But just speaking for charter schools, I know we've started a couple of initiatives with some other high-quality charters in a couple of metropolitan areas here in Texas, just starting with incremental steps, like all having the lotteries on the same day and applicants do at the same time. I mean, there are so many things you can do before you have to start spending money, and not that you don't want to have money and a robust infrastructure, but I would just encourage those in the audience that are listening to think in terms of what you could do next week as well as what you want to do over the next year or year and a half.
Griff, I'll just say that I'm so glad you said that. You know, SERPE is just about to conclude a major study of common enrollment in both New Orleans and Denver. And one of the things we really push people to think about is, you know, common enrollment is great, but there are a bunch of intermediate steps, low-hanging fruit, just as you suggested, that can really simplify the process for families in a big way with pretty little investment on the front end. And it's actually a lot easier to get buy-in from various stakeholders on those efforts than going to a full-fledged common enrollment system. So I think that's a really great point to throw out there.
That's actually great, and I know, you know, there's like the SKY partnership where you're seeing the district, you know, district and charter collaboration going on in Texas right now. So that's really something that I think is really exciting to hear about. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the barriers that the families face. What other barriers are there in offering choice, and what can be done to overcome these? I know we've already talked a little bit about some of these, but Armen, I'm going to go back and pick on you here for a second, because I know in our conversations previously this has been something that you've been passionate about, that it's not just about choices, it's about quality. So I want to let you kind of have the floor here to share a little bit about that. And Ashley, I know you've got some great thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I've really wrestled with this whole kind of conversation and movement as we look at a place like Detroit that has, I think, probably accomplished, you know, version 1.0 of school choice, which was largely, let's create a lot of school choices. Let's have lots of new schools popping up. Let's have lots of schools recruiting kids, and we have that. We have as much of it as you'll find anywhere. But it hits me that school choice is not about lots of schools. School choice is about the ability of folks to navigate school choice, to make choices. And so I think a lot about the barriers. I just think we have to start thinking about quality as the #1 focus or priority now. I think that we have an absolute right, or I think the burden's on all of us who are part of this conversation to ensure that, you know, there are as few bad choices as possible. I think about school choice now, and in the context of where I live, it's about fit. We want to make sure every kid can find a school that fits their basic, you know, their various learning needs. Some are small, some are big schools, some are project-based, some are blended, some are traditional, like, all kinds of fit issues. But they all should be good. Like, they should all be aiming in the same direction, and the outcome for every kid coming out of the school should be roughly the same, that you're college and career and life ready. So this is a huge, I think that's a huge shift, at least in a place like Detroit and Michigan, for us to start to talk about how do we make sure that school choice actually leads to better outcomes, not just more choices.
Yeah.
Amy, if I could, and I don't, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's taking the parent and student's point of view. It occurred to me in a lot of our high schools, we have dual credit capabilities here in Texas. And you sit back and you say, with some of the initiatives that were expressed in the State of the Union speech, free college, what that's going to mean, and so on. Movement. Everyone interested in making sure a child is in the right school at the right time. And I should say, as a marginal remark, I tell people all the time, I think very quickly we're coming to the point that a child's going to be in brick and mortar, going to be at some point in their career, they're going to be in a virtual school at some time, that they're going to be in a charter school perhaps, they're going to be in a specialized magnet school. You know, we have this history, 120 plus year idea that once you make an educational choice, you're kind of in that path. And I think we have to encourage people to say that, you know, there may be other paths that are better for you. But I think the other thing we can do, the last report I looked at, the average high school of Consular has just under 500 students. They're hardworking people, well-intentioned people. There's no way that one individual working in even a long day, a long week, is going to be able to give individualized information to a parent and student like that. And I think we should see that. I actually have a vision that charter schools of choice ought to do that, whether they're talking to their students or they just make it available to the community. So, sorry to interrupt.
Do you have a, no, that's okay. Ashley, did you have a follow-up on that? Or?
Yeah, I think I would echo Armen's concerns. I mean, look, choice implies that you have 2 or more options that you are choosing from, and that both would be satisfactory. And I think we are away from that reality in many cities. And as much as we need more work to sort of streamline these process issues and improve access to choice, the challenge of improving quality, I think, looms much larger. And so I think this is really a key area where we need more work in thinking about what can be done to address those issues, particularly in individual neighborhoods. So, you know, we, as part of our work studying Detroit and our research for a report that was released last July, we did a map of all of the highest quality schools in Detroit. And what you realize when you look at a map like that is, and I think this is true in many cities, is that you have quality deserts out there, which sort of just exacerbate these challenges with choosing a school for your child. So,
Great.
Yeah.
So the next kind of topic that I just want to move to, and I know I'm going to be respectful of our time here. We've only got about 5 minutes left. This has been some great dialogue today. There's a 2-part question here, kind of, you know, what this panel has as far as any recommendations for people listening today to move that family engagement to the next level for choice, and then as you're kind of giving your comments on that, any pitfalls that you think about, you know, to avoid. I mean, I know we've talked about, you know, too many kind of cooks in the kitchen there with all the different agencies responsible for public oversight of choice without having clear communication. You know, I don't know if Grif or Ashley, you want to hop in on this one?
Well, I would say the biggest pitfall that any organization can fall into is to have the lens of what they're delivering from their point of view. And the lens should always be to the people that you're trying to attract to your value proposition.
Sure. Ashley?
Yeah, so I think on sort of the positive in terms of what I would encourage folks to do is really talk with families directly about their needs and challenges. One of the things that was so clear from this 8-city survey we did is that every city is different, and the sticking points really vary considerably depending on a lot of market conditions that people aren't necessarily thinking about. Another thing that really came out is that different families in different cities are struggling more. So in some of our cities, families with a child with special needs were much more likely to report difficulty. And, you know, if that's the case, you might, you know, target an intervention around those families rather than sort of going system-wide. So I think that's my recommendation, is just to talk with families and think about what that implies for your work. In terms of the pitfalls, I think, you know, people in the debate over school choice, people talk a lot about the district and charter schools as sort of these 2 systems locked in a battle. But, you know, this language is really disconnected from the reality in which parents experience choice. And so I think trying to elevate the discussion to focus more on families' challenges and needs provides an opportunity to collaborate across, you know, district charter lines and, you know, do some problem-solving work.
Great. So I've got about 1 minute or 2 minutes left here. I want to kind of give the panelists all one final opportunity. If you had one major takeaway, you know, we've heard a lot today. There's great strides made in family engagement around choice. There's opportunities as well. But what would be one kind of takeaway that you would like to share briefly with our audience before we go to our concluding slide? Vidya, I'll let you kind of start it off.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you know, it's really important to provide really clear and transparent and comparable information about schools and school quality, so so that it can both help parents make better decisions, but also help identify where schools are in need of improvement and can help inform better dialogue between, you know, all the different stakeholders in schools and school choice to help drive overall school improvement.
No, great thoughts. Armen, back over to you in Detroit there.
Well, let me just start by saying thank you for having us, and I dare say I think that Detroit's going to wow folks nationally here soon. We are the way we're thinking about this work with kind of a critical eye toward academic outcomes and working with folks. I mean, the amount of collaboration to try to build this infrastructure to think critically about this stuff across various political spectrums and ideologies and schools and families, and it's a big moment here in Detroit. But I would just say, like, at the end of the day, this whole movement, for all those folks out there listening who have carried it this far, and it's been a huge lift so far, I get that. But it's time to really think about how this movement now shifts gears to make sure that school choice means that parents can actually access their choices equitably, and that school choice actually results in really high-quality outcomes for kids. School choice for the sake of school choice might be really important. I don't doubt that it's a moral obligation that we should have. Like I said, I think it's a right. But I think that the movement has to be far more critical of itself and what we're doing next. I think it's all about quality and all about access.
Yeah, great. And we're excited to see what good things are going to be happening in Detroit. So I'm sure we'll all be staying tuned to hearing that. Grif, a few quick remarks to close up here, and then Ashley will let you have a few remarks as well.
I think what we've heard is excellent, and I would agree with it. And the only other thing I would add is I think everyone in the movement, everyone, not just the movement, trying to improve quality education has to do it with a sense of urgency, because today's third graders, tomorrow's fourth grader, very quickly, and fifth grader. And I see some of these programs and discussions, and I realize structural change may take years, but there are incremental steps that can impact lives next semester, next school year. The other thing I would point out is on your last chart, your PowerPoint, response, it needs to be an in the website for responsive ed. And thank you for inviting us to participate, Amy.
You're welcome. Ashley?
Yeah, I think my takeaway from this discussion is that we're at such a different point in sort of in the school choice movement, and to sort of echo what Armen said, we're at a point where we're really can start thinking about the systems that we put in place that make the system navigable for parents. And so I think that's really exciting, and that we're just at the beginning of these conversations, and that there's a lot still to learn.
Well, thank you for all your research. It really helped guide our conversations today. So thank you all for attending. Thank you to our panelists. You guys have added a lot of value to this and some great conversation. We've got your organizations listed up there for you to be able to reach out to. I actually posted a link of Ashley's research paper on our website, so I encourage you to be able to go there and take a look at that and download that. And we will put this webcast up on infosnap.com. And any questions, you can feel free to direct them to me, Amy at infosnap.com. And thanks so much to the National School Choice Group for letting us have this spotlight event. And we look forward to doing something next year. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Sound okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me turn you off.